I'm the new guy. It's not awkward at all. So I just thought, you know what? I'll let you know a little bit about me. Grew up in SoCal, in Buena Park, La Palma, kind of that area, that kind of thing. Um, what else? Love sports. Absolutely love sports. Went to college in Missouri. Met my wife while I was in college. She grew up in Oklahoma. And I brought her back to California with me immediately upon graduation. I have begged forgiveness from her father ever since. He finally forgave us when we gave him grandchildren, so we're good on that. So I got two daughters. One of them's Kirsten. She's 22. She's married. I have a son-in-law, which I'm getting used to saying that. So a little over a year now, and we absolutely love him. He works at Disneyland. Solid guy. She met him in the church college group where we were attending at the time. I have another daughter, Taylor, who's 18. And Taylor, my wife, Lisa and Taylor, why don't you stand so everybody can see her or something so they can go, okay, Lisa and Taylor. All right. So I'll give you a heads up real quick. When you talk to Taylor can hear everything you say, but Taylor's mute. And you'll learn more about her in our life and everything right now. So she won't be able to speak. She's not being rude, I promise. She'll smile, shake your hand, wave, and that kind of thing. So, Lisa is. I've definitely married up. She's an amazing woman, a very talented woman. She's got a music degree. She was the worship pastor at our church plant when we planted a church in Arizona. Goodness, was that 15 years ago now? Wow, time flies. And you'll hear various stories kind of about that. So that's kind of just a little quick thing about the family. Now, when you're doing an interim is hard because interim is temporary leadership, is kind of how that works. And an interim is really hard when you're following someone who's beloved. I mean, let's face it. I mean, Kathy was beloved, and you guys accepted Guy. Okay? So he said I could make fun of him all I want. So he texted me this morning. No, actually, it would be easier. If instead of a guy being beloved, it would be easier if the guy was more like this guy in this video. Let's just show him, if I was following this, it would be much easier for me. Do we have that for him? Here we go.
Today's reading comes from the book of Proverbs. If I may digress for a moment from my prepared message, I mean it when I say to you, you guys, sometimes you're bad. Don't be jerks. You're supposed to be good. I'm in my office every day, and somebody comes in, and they're like, hey, whoops. I'm like, don't. Dan, what is your deal? If anybody doesn't know, Dan is the worst. I took a vow to not say who is the worst, but it's Dan. You guys are making me look bad in front of God. What's that? Oh, look, it's Jesus. And he said, stop it. The word of the Lord.
Okay. All right, if I could follow that guy, I would just be like, yeah, okay, excellent. So, and is there a Dan in the room? Anyway, no, I'm just kidding. So, here's the thing. Inside your little thing there, you've got this note sheet, and you might want to grab that because there's going to be some things that I'm hoping you will capture out of today. My goal with every message is the same. I'm hoping that no matter where you are, no matter if you are just checking out who God is, all the way up to you would say, I've known God for years, and I work hard to let him lead my life, that both ends of the spectrum and everyone in between would have a nugget out of what we talk about today that you'll go, that's the thing that God wanted to say to me. Sometimes we need to just write that down to help us remember it. I know that helps us really grasp and grow a little bit. Now, I've told you just a little bit about my family. I'm a golf nut. I love to play golf. You're going to hear about it multiple times. Hey, okay, all right. I have, thank you. Anyway, here's your $5 bill for clapping. Anyway, no, I am. I'm absolutely golf nut. And I want to tell you about a trip. Bandon Dunes is this incredible, unbelievable golf course. In order to get there, what you have to do is you've got to figure out how you're going to get to Portland, Oregon. So you've got to go to the problem of you got to buy a plane ticket, you've got to go to the airport, you've got to take the flight, you've got to get to Portland, Oregon, you've got to get a rental car. Then from there, you've got to drive about 3 to 3.5 hours south of Portland down the 5 until you get to a little town called Roseburg. And when you get to Roseburg, you've got to make a turn and head west towards the coast. And you've got to drive about an hour and 15 minutes along this just windy, through the woods. Looks like you're just kind of going nowhere. It's just a little 2-lane road. And you'll get to a tiny sign that tells you, it says Highway 14. And you got to turn right on Highway 14. And you got to follow that for another 40 minutes. And then you get to a point where you kind of come out of the woods and there's a bunch of dunes and wispy grass. And there's a small little sign, it's just about this big in wood with carved out of it that says Bandon Dunes with an arrow. And you got to make the left right there. So you have to spot the sign and you got to find where you're going to go. You turn in, then once you're in, it's not like it's an obvious giant building in front of you. You've got to kind of wind your way through those dunes. And eventually you come to the point where there's a small building that's the pro shop. And you walk up to that and that's where you've got to check in. Now, Bandon Dunes is incredible because they've got 6 courses there. 3 of their 6 courses are in the top 20 courses in the U.S. One of them is considered in the top 10 in the world. It is unbelievable golf, absolutely incredible. The reward for that journey is absolutely amazing, but here's the deal. Some are willing to travel while others won't make the journey. I want you to think about that for just a minute. Some are willing to travel while others won't make the journey. The other side is amazing. If you're willing to go through everything that I just described, and it's totally worth it, but there's some people who just aren't willing to make the journey. So I want you to hold on to that thought. We're going to come back to it. I want to share a story with you today that's found, it's in history, it's found in God's Word. And we're just going to kind of pull some parts out of it. Now, most of us, we know the story of the 10 Commandments, right? We see the movie that comes on like every year around Easter. We kind of know what leads up to that. We know that the Israelites were enslaved. They were held in Egypt by Pharaoh, and he was forcing them to do hard labor. We kind of know the movie side of the story. But then what we realize is, or what we know about that story is we know that eventually God worked through Moses. He used Moses to facilitate the release of God's people from Egypt so that they could pursue the promised land. But that only happened after, remember, we had the plagues. They had all the different plagues that came through. They had the plague of frogs that came in, right? So we had frogs everywhere, disgusting. We had the plague of flies. I can't imagine what that was like. We had the plague of locusts, all right? We had the plague of hail, and we had the plague of junior hires. They were all there, and they were awful. They were rolling their eyes and checking their cell phone, and they wouldn't put it down at dinner time. Okay, let's take that away. Anyway, they had all of those, and eventually they had the death angel, that passed over. And finally Pharaoh said, enough is enough. And he says, it's time for you to leave. And the people left. And as they left, we know from that story, we know there's a point that they came to the Red Sea, and it kind of had the ta-da kind of moment, the whole idea of, Moses raised his staff, and God miraculously parted that water. Not only did he part the water, but he did some sort of supernatural drying of the land so that people could walk through on dry land and not get stuck trying to make their way through the mud. And then they made it through the other side. The Egyptians had started to chase after him, and God closed that up, and he protected his people. We know from that story that they wandered in the desert for 40 years. There are a lot of different things that we remember from the idea of the story of the 10 Commandments and the story of God's people leaving Egypt. But did you know that there was a shortcut when they left Egypt? I bet you didn't. We find it over in Exodus chapter 13. It's going to come up on the screen here. Exodus chapter 13. Matter of fact, I'll just read off the screen. It's much easier that way. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though that was shorter. There was a shortcut, guys. There was an easier way for them to get there. He could have led them directly through the Philistine country, but he decided not to do that. And he had a specific reason why he decided not to do that. And here it is. It said, for God said, if they face war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. I'll bet you didn't know there was a shortcut. But see, the thing is God knew what was best for his people. He knew what they needed. And the deal is, they needed the growth of the desert trip. They did. They needed the growth that was going to be accompanied by that trip through the desert. As I said before, many times we remember that they wandered for 40 years, but did you know that that wasn't even the original plan? There was a shortcut that we don't know about, but many times people just remember, wow, they wandered in the desert for 40 years, but that wasn't the original plan that God had. Shortly into the trip, they actually reached the entrance to the promised land. And they came to that, and when they came to that, God kind of called a timeout, and he said, okay, I want you to send in some spies to check out the land. And so they sent in 12 men, one guy from each tribe. And when they went in, they were there, and they surveyed everything. They kind of did their spying. You know, I kind of picture this goofy, like hiding behind trees and binoculars thing, but it wasn't that. They just made their way through the land to figure out what they were going to be up against. And then they came out and they gave a report. And it's where we get, if you came to church when you were a little kid, you might remember that song, the 12 men went to spy on Canaan, 10 were bad and 2 were good. Do you guys remember that? Anybody remember that song? Just me. Okay. Okay, there's like 3 of us. We'll do it together, okay? When the 12 went to Canaan, 10 were bad and 2 were good. Remember that? That was my only thing. I just remember doing this, and that was the fun of the whole thing. At the time, I couldn't tell you what the song was about. I just knew I got to do this. So, but that's where that song came from. The whole thing is the men come out, the 12 guys, and they start to tell everybody about what happened. They give their report. And 10 of the guys are going to say, I'm not sure about this, but 2 of the guys are going to stand up. We find that over in Numbers chapter 13. Just a couple books later, Numbers 13. This is a bigger block of Scripture. I want you to follow along with me here, okay? And I'm going to read this for you. It'll be on the screen, and you can just kind of follow right there. Actually, let's just read off the screen. They gave Moses this account. Okay, they are the 12 guys who were spying, okay? It's actually 10 of the 12 guys who really give the majority of this at this point. They gave Moses this account because Moses is in charge. We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here is its fruit. In other words, at the beginning, they're saying, man, you said that this land was amazing. You told us that God had this promised land for us, and it's supposed to be incredible. And yeah, look, it is incredible. It does flow with milk and honey. And look at the fruit. I picture them bringing like giant, grapes and strawberries and watermelon and things. Just go, look at all of this. It's absolutely incredible. But then here's the problem. It's that one little word right there. But. They transition and they change over. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. In other words, they're saying, we saw these huge people. The descendants of Anak are the large people. Let's go on to the next one. It says, the Amalekites live in the Negev. The Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites live in the hill country. And the Canaanites live near the sea and along the Jordan. They're naming off all these other nations that they're saying, man, all these incredible people that we've heard of, they all live there. Then Caleb, who was one of the 12 spies, silenced the people before Moses and said, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. He's saying, guys, we can do this. We can follow what God has planned for us. We can do exactly what he led us out of Egypt to do. But the problem is, that's not what ends up happening. It goes on and it says this, but the men who had gone up with him said, that's the other 10 guys, they say, we can't attack those people. They're stronger than we are. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they had explored. They said, the land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there of great size. And they start telling them again about who they saw. We saw the Nephilim there. That's the descendants of Anak come from Nephilim. The Nephilim are the ones that Goliath comes from. Huge, giant people. We seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. The deal is, they weren't willing to go through to the reward. They weren't willing to make the journey that got them to the reward on the other side. They let fear dominate over faith. I'd encourage you to write that down. That's really important to remember. This was a point in time when God's people let fear dominate their lives instead of faith. Now, why am I sharing this story? Why am I pointing these things out? Here's why. As a church right now, Venture is making a promised land type of transition. You're moving to something new. You're not changing your location. That's not happening right now at this moment. But your senior pastor is changing. There is something new, something different, something that's transitioning and changing. Something new is coming. And it can be an exciting time. But the problem is, a lot of things can derail that excitement and send you wandering. If we were to complete reading that story and we were to go on from there, what we would find is that the people listened to the 10 spies that were complaining, that were saying, yeah, they devour everyone and they're huge and we couldn't possibly take them on. And all the people started grumbling and complaining and whining. And what we see is gossip begins to take over, fear begins to take over. It goes on in Numbers chapter 14. It tells us about bickering among the people. It tells us about arguments. It tells us about a tremendous lack of faith. And what happens is all those things dominate their lives instead of faith in the one true God that knew what they needed through the desert trip, knew what should happen for them. And the result was they ended up wandering for 40 years, right? That's how the story goes. So they come out of Egypt. God knows there's a shortcut, but he doesn't take them on that shortcut because he knows they need the growth of the desert trip. So he takes them and he gets them a little bit of growth. They see the miracle of the parting of the Red Sea and they're going, wow, look at this. This is amazing. And all of a sudden they're like, we're hungry. So they see every morning they wake up and manna has fallen from heaven and quail is there. And all of their food and water needs are taken care of. And they're looking where they're supposed to go. And God is guiding them with a pillar of smoke during the day, a pillar of fire at night. And he leads them right up to the promised land. He says, all right, send these guys in so you're ready and know what you're facing. And the problem is, at that moment, fear dominated over faith, and they moved down this other path that led them into gossip and bickering, and they end up wandering for 40 years. And God has to wait out all of the people who were willing to let fear be in charge instead of letting him be in charge. What ends up happening there is all of those people die out. All the people who were the gossips, all the people that let fear run, all the people that let all those negative things happen, those end up dying out before God can actually go ahead and bring them into the promised land. Now, let me take this back to what I talked about at the beginning for just a minute. I told you already that I'm a golf nut, right? You may not know this, even if you don't play golf. What do you think is the most important club in my bag? I thought about bringing my golf bag up here with me. But what's the most important club in my bag? Anybody know? The putter, that's right. I heard a couple guys, they knew right away. The putter is the most important. You're like, congratulations, you got the right answer. Good job. All right. You get a sticker. Anyway, okay. Your putter, yeah, that's number one because you use that more than any other. And it can do some great things for you and it can do some really bad things for you. What's the second most important club in my bag? Driver, yeah, because the driver is I hit it more often than, the only one I hit more often is the putter. Driver is the one that I use the second most, and it can do some great things for me, and it can also get me in a whole lot of trouble. Because those are the two most important clubs in my bag, I focus a ton of my golfing attention on those. They are the primary focus. I want you to grasp the concept of primary focus. Because as you move towards a new leader, you need to be on that primary focus. You need to get that dialed in. You need to say, we're not going to let fear dominate over faith. Instead, we're going to keep our eyes on the primary focus of what God has for us. And that's really my goal in the interim, is I hope I can keep us pointed on the primary focus, on what really matters and what really counts. Well, what is that primary focus? When Jesus was asked about it, and they said to him, well, what's the most important commandment? Think about how he answered. In Matthew 22, verse 37 through 39, we find that. It says, Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Now, I underlined 4 words in there because I think that really defines it. Love God, love others. It's real simple. That's what we need to be doing. That's our primary focus. Those are our two things. We're going to love God and we're going to love others. That comes out different in tons of different church, in like all different churches. And it's worded differently in a lot of different churches. It can come out in worship. It can come out in small groups. It can come out in service opportunities. It comes out in the very communion time that we just celebrated together and that we do weekly around here. It comes out in how we're involved in the community. It comes out in the way that we speak to others as individuals. It comes out in the way we handle different situations in our lives. I don't think it can come out on the 91 freeway. I don't think that's possible. Oh, goodness. Anyway, I was on there this morning, and trust me, it was not out. Anyway, okay? Love God, love others is the focus. It is the primary focus, and it is where we need to be in our lives. We need to say, those are the two things that we're going to do, because we need to be reminded, we need to remember that that's where we place all our attention, because this thing that we're in, this relationship with God, this church that God has built, this church God has built. Guy didn't build this church. God built this church. He just managed to use Guy in the process. I'll tell you how I know that. I know that because we planted a church a couple years before Guy and Kathy planted this church. And when the time came that we transitioned away from there, those people are all connected and doing better and better than they ever did with us, because God had a plan for their next step. And it's God's church. The exact same thing is true here. If we remember to love God and love others, we'll remember a phrase that I want you guys, actually it's not even going to come up on the screen. I want you guys to remember this, and I'm going to repeat this several times over the next few weeks. This is for all. This is for all. All people, all nations, all races, all socioeconomic, all backgrounds, all sinners. It is for all. Every single person is who this is for. Love God, love others. That is absolutely our primary focus. I encourage you to make the hard move, to come through to the other side. Experience the reward. Make the hard journey. I said some key things here today. They're going to come up on the screen again. I said this. I said some are willing to travel while others won't make the journey. My question to you is, are you willing to make the journey to the other side? Are you willing to say, yeah, this is tough and I don't like transition? No, I mean, people don't like transition and change. They just don't, because there's that uncertainty. But are you willing to make the journey to the other side? I also said they needed the growth of the desert trip. My question about that is, what growth do you need during this time? What do you need God to do in you during this time of transition? We're actually going to take something on this next week, starting in a series, and we're calling the series Next. And it's going to help with this concept of what's our transition. For those of you that were here last week, you'll remember that one of the things that Guy said several times, he asked the question, what's your next step? Or he made the statement, take your next step. He kept saying that over and over and over again. So we're going to do a series called Next that helps all of us take our next step. When you came in, on your chair, there would have been one of these little guys right here. It says Next. On the back of that, you can see the next 4 weeks, what we're going to do. And the idea is we're going to help people with where our next step is. The first week is going to be all about the whole idea of exploring who Jesus is, who God is. What does it mean if you're the person who says, I'm just still checking out who God is, and I'm not sure if I'm going to let Jesus be in charge of my life? That's what next week is all about. If you've got friends and you're saying, man, that person needs to hear this, I encourage you to invite them. That's actually why we gave you this. This is an invite card. We did it business card size so you can stick it in your pocket, and you can go to your neighbor, your family member, your coworker, your friend, and you can say, I really want you to hear this, because we're going to be exploring who Jesus is. And I know you've been checking it out. I know you've been wondering. I know you've been thinking, I want to invite you to come with me. Come. This is your ticket to come sit next to me. All right? You can invite him to come along with you. The week after that, we're going to cover the whole idea of how do we engage in healthy habits and healthy relationships. And maybe that's your next step. Maybe that's the thing as we ask, what growth do I need? Maybe it's, well, I've been coming to church, but I need to get into some good relationships. I need to develop some healthy habits in life. We're going to talk about the week after that, how do I serve? How do I get myself equipped so I can serve others? Because we can't love God and love others without serving them. Plain and simple, we just can't do it. Last week is expand. How on earth do I ever tell anyone about the difference that Jesus is making in my life? Because is there anything more scary or awkward feeling to us, I mean, than to just out of the blue talk to someone about our faith? It's just intimidating, isn't it? I mean, there are a lot of other things. We'd rather talk to someone about really awkward subjects like money or, I don't know what it is. I can't think of anything that I can say up front. Anyway, they're way worse. There are things that we're like, boy, it's so hard. And so we're going to help you guys through that. But where do you need to grow? Where do you need to grow in this idea of say, God, what are you going to do with me during this desert trip? And let me just remind you on this. This is real important to remember. God planned this desert trip that Venture and you as individuals are moving through right now. This isn't a surprise to God. When Guy came and told the leadership, or when Guy told the church of the transition that he felt they needed to make in life, it's not like God was in heaven going, oh, I didn't know. Why didn't he let me know? I mean, that's not how God knew. And God could be looking at this going, you know what? Yeah, it'd be great if they went on the shortcut that took them through the Philistine country. But when they faced the battles, they might have turned back. And so they need to grow a little bit here. And maybe he's got some growth for you. He hasn't put everything on pause. Venture Christian Church is not on pause. It's just on its next step in the journey, okay, guys? One other thing I said to you is I said they let fear dominate over faith. Will your faith in God beat out any fear of change that you're dealing with right now? Will you let your faith be the leading thing? The Promised Land became a launching point for changing the world. The Israelites finally came, and they came to the Promised Land, and his people grew there, and Joseph met Mary there, and Jesus Christ himself was born there, and he ministered there, and he lived a perfect life, and he died there, and he rose again from the dead there. Eternity was changed. That journey to the Promised Land was a launching point that changed the entire world. Venture Christian Church can be the exact same thing. This can be a launching point like you've never experienced. It can have you experiencing things that just go beyond what you've imagined in your life. Incredible things can happen. I don't know what this is. This just called the Temecula Valley? Is that the name of this area? Somebody help me out. Yeah, just the Temecula Valley. Okay, thank you. At least one person helped me out there. Thanks to all of you. Anyway, again, I'm the new guy. Anyway, okay. Temecula Valley needs to have the impact of a believer everywhere. Remember, this is for all. So let this be a launching point for change for the Temecula Valley. Last question is this. Who do you love enough to bring on this journey? Who do you care about enough that you want them to come along with you? That you're saying, you know what? I just know God got something amazing in store for us. I just know it. Who else do you want to bring along? I encourage you to use that invite card. Get them here with us. Get them here and let them be introduced to Jesus Christ, the one man that will change their address for all of eternity. We're going to jump into the next series next week, and we'll walk through that. And it is a perfect week to invite your friend that you really want them to meet Jesus. I'm hoping that you'll do that. Let's pray together. Lord God, you are a good and loving God, and we thank you for the lessons that we learn from the time that you led your people through the desert. Lord, we thank you for the fact that that you had big plans, that you wanted to effect change, even when I guarantee that the Israelites, Lord, I know they would have preferred the simple path. But Lord, you had plans for what was going to happen in the desert. And God, we thank you for that. We thank you for those tremendous plans of what you had laid out. God, I'm hoping that you'll help us as we grab a hold of what's next for us. I pray that you'll help beat back the fear of change that so easily just kind of boils up inside of us, that instead what you'll do is you'll help us just have faith right out, that faith will become number one. Help us to do that by having a proper primary focus, Lord. Because we know this is for all. What you're doing here, Lord, this is for all. Help us live that out. It's in your Son's name I pray. Amen.